Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today we are talking about chapter 48 of The Wandering Inn, book 1. So this is going to be a full spoiler discussion. I have read, reviewed and reacted to every single chapter in The Wandering Inn so far. You'll find a playlist down below where you can see all of the previous chapters. But with the content of this chapter in particular, I just want to get straight into things. So I didn't like this chapter. This is the first chapter in the whole of The Wandering Inn where I came away with an overall worse opinion of the story as a whole because of this chapter. Looking at normally what happens when I record these is I just finish reading, put the tablet down and start talking to you guys. But today I went and read through all the comments at the bottom of the chapter, and a lot of people had a very, very similar opinion to me. So in fact, I would say that was the lion's share of the comments. Obviously, thousands of people are reading this and not commenting, so possibly I'm a very, very small minority of people who are reading The Wandering Inn and having this kind of thought. But I just thought this chapter was not fun to read. I understand when you want to put your readers in the head of a character that is not particularly likable in many ways, or a character who has to do something that is not particularly likable. But this chapter felt like it felt like 0 to 60 in a single chapter, or not even in a single chapter. It felt like 0 to 60 in a few sentences. Last week's chapter, we ended with Ryoka challenging a silver rank adventurer captain to a sparring match, and that was quite a good cliffhanger ending. So I'm thinking, we love Ryoka. We really like the characters that surround her. We like the relationships that she's built. And seeing her bring this kind of upper arse, haughty adventuring captain down a peg would have been a fun thing to read. And at the beginning of the chapter, I was enjoying it. So, we get a bit of build up. Ryoka does some stretches. We get a few paragraphs from Gari's point of view to start the chapter, and we like Gari a lot in this house. Essentially, I would say that Ryoka's supporting cast is, for me, much stronger than Erin's of the two protagonists. But to divert a little from the recappy part of this video, and I think that this video is going to be a bit of a jumble, and I'm probably not going to do as strong a job of recapping as I normally would, as I read this one over a fairly long period of time, like over an hour it took me to read this one, because I kind of kept putting it down and picking it back up, and I think this chapter really, really turned me off. I think if I had been reading this, if this chapter or something like it had come very early in the series, I probably would not have continued. And that would have been the end of The Wandering Inn read along. That's we're talking, if I was rating chapters on a 5-star scale, pretty much every chapter of The Wandering Inn so far would have been a 4 or a 5. But this chapter, I'd be struggling to decide between a 1 or a 2-star out of 5. I don't often give a 1-star, and I would usually only give a 1-star for something that was just painfully bad. But this 2-star reflects, in my opinion, how I felt reading it. I didn't want to read it. I felt that a lot of the character decisions made no sense. They don't build on previous things we've learned about characters. Ryoka the thing as well is that Ryoka is the POV, right? So we should know what's going on because we're in her head. And if I don't know what's going on from a narration that's from her point of view, I think that's not good writing. And I'm going to hold my hands up and say that I'm not the best writer in the world. I have a degree in creative writing, but I'm not a published author. I don't have millions of fans around the globe like Pirate Arbor does. But this chapter in particular, I really, really heavily disliked. And as I said, again, if this had come earlier in The Wandering Inn, I might have stopped reading. So yeah, we get to... So we've got Ryoka, and she's in, she's doing this sparring, and she's, Ryoka is very confident, and I think that her overconfidence, well, not overconfidence, because she's very, very highly skilled. So we've got Ryoka having come from the real world as like a champion level, nationally ranked MMA fighter, and also she happens to just be one of the fastest runners in the world. I mean, I know one of the things that people have said in the comments is to just disregard when Pirate Arbor talks about running stuff and like about distances. Like, for example, and a runner would take, like, some of the best runners in the world are taking 24 hours to run 100 miles. And, the best runner in the world, Eliud Kipchoge, whatever, right? He has run the marathon in 1 hour 59, and that's 26 miles. But he could not do that and then more. So basically, what I'm saying is Ryoka is already stretching belief in terms of her fighting ability, because she is just a person. She hasn't talked about being like nationally famous for Muay Thai or MMA. She hasn't even fought a person before. She says that she's never been allowed to fight a person. So a lot of this chapter really, really stretches belief. And whether that is a hint at world building stuff to come in the future or not, it doesn't read like that. So what Pirate Arbor, in my opinion, should have done with this chapter is, if this is, there is something magical going on with Ryoka, which is making her, faster, stronger, more capable. I mean, I know that one of the big factors in this world is that people they level up. And so because they level up, they don't have to try at a lot of stuff. So for example, Yvonne, yeah. So she's a silver ranked adventurer captain, and she's good at hand-to-hand fighting because she's got levels in whatever. But like, this is kind of like how Spider-Man, for example, in the comic books, there's a whole arc of Spider-Man where he loses his spider sense and he realizes that he's actually not a good fighter. He's never like trained or learned how to fight. He just knows when the punches are coming and so just avoids them. So he's not a good fighter. He's mostly just lashing out blindly, but relying on his spider sense as kind of sixth sense, as an intuition, as a crutch to do all of the strategy and all the thinking around fighting for him. When he loses it, he then has to train with a master martial artist. But the thing is, Yvonne, yes, she might be relying on her powers, but we have also heard that she barehanded has beaten 5 enemies who had weapons, and she's wearing armor, and Ryoka has not slept for over 24 hours. She's recently broken her leg to the point she couldn't walk, and while it was magically healed, there was some talk of like it's not going to be perfect. It's still regrowing and rehealing. all of this, the fight sequence with her just really stretches believability. And I think that in sci-fi and fantasy, you do need to have that. You need to have the ability to put things aside and go like, well, magic doesn't exist, but like, well, magic does. You need to be able to go like, yes, this isn't very believable, but also in this world there are elves and magic, which obviously don't exist and aren't real. But because Ryoka comes from our world, we have this basis of understanding. And then on top of that, the science fiction and fantasy stories still have to have internal logic, I think. So, like, if in a story, for example, your wizard magical characters can literally do anything with no consequence or issue, that story isn't interesting. If your character, who is a 20-year-old girl who is a Olympic level runner, are they also a world champion level Muay Thai MMA fighter without ever having actually fought anyone? It's too unbelievable for me. This is a lot of criticism, and I sound very down on this chapter, and honestly, I am down on this chapter. A lot of the time when I do videos like this and I have to give some strong criticism, or I say, I didn't like X, Y, Z, I'll go like, I'm talking a lot about the negatives, but actually, it was okay. But honestly here, I don't have that opinion. If I was in any way on the fence about The Wandering Inn from the other 47 chapters that I have read, you would probably not be seeing another episode in this series. Luckily, for everyone who loves this series, I'm extremely bought in on the previous 47 chapters. And so if more chapters like this continue to crop up, I think it's unlikely. I think that there is a likelihood that I would DNF The Wandering Inn. But I'm still committed to finishing Volume 1, and I don't see any reason why I would not continue after that. Unless, again, if there's more chapters like this, which just... So much of this didn't make sense. So we've got the personality shift in Ryoka, where she literally goes from 0 to 60, 0 to 100 in sentences, and it just does not make sense for me at all. The fact that she's able to hold her own in these fights does not make sense to me at all. And it stretches the... What's the term I'm looking for? I can't remember the term that I'm looking for. Suspension of disbelief. It stretches the suspension of disbelief to breaking point, in my opinion. Like, when she runs through the high passes, that's such a good section of a chapter. Because she's running at her fastest pace. She's not engaging with gargoyles and monster goats. She's trying to fight off some wolves, which, like, a martial artist might be able to fight off a wolf, but, like, especially a wolf that's being attacked from the other side or distracted, or, the bottom of the food chain in this high pass. That all makes sense, and she has to run away, and she almost dies. And she would have died if not for the dragon fixing her up. But this the suspension of disbelief my suspension of disbelief is not strong enough to take this person from our world, who has to live within the rules and structure of our world, who's been transported to a magical world which does have still rules and structures. They are just different. And a lot of it just does not make sense to me, honestly. This is a tough one. So, we'll fast forward a little bit because we've already been here 15 minutes talking about this. And everybody knows this chapter, I would imagine, because there's like 10 times more comments on it than there are on any other ones. And actually quite a few people commented in the comments that this is where they have decided to stop reading. And I 100% understand that. If you did not like Ryoka before, Or actually, I mean, like, I really liked Ryoka. She was my favourite character. And now I'm going to be honestly dreading future chapters from her because I just don't want more of this. I think we need to rein everything back with Ryoka. Like, her temper stuff makes no sense. Like, I know people who get, I've known people in my life, for example, who have tempers that they struggle to control. I've known people who are good runners. I've known people who do, martial arts. But, like, it just does not make sense to me at all. Anyway, so she fights Yvonne, and she basically wins against a woman in full plate armor, who she can only attack her head because everything else is covered. A woman who is an experienced lifelong fighter, who has fought multiple men at the same time. Doesn't make sense. And then she finishes fighting Yvonne, and then she starts having a go at all the adventurers and like just saying the adventurers are shit and being like, oh, you need other people, you can't do anything by yourself, oh, you need your levels, you're all weak, you're all cowards. And like Calrose is like, hey, like, come on, mate, stop doing that. And she's like, well, I'll fight you too. And he's like, I'm not going to fight you, like, I'm a 7 foot tall Minotaur, I could literally crush you by accidentally tripping over. And she's like, no, I'm going to fight you. So she like tries to force Calrose to fight her. Eventually he gets too angry because like that's an attribute of his race, that he has a temper that's hard to control, and he doesn't like his honor being besmirched. So he starts to fight her, and she like does a ton of she's able to hit him a load of times and she hits him hard, even though he's trying to be honorable and trying not to hurt her. So he's like not really trying to fight. But she eventually hits him hard enough that he gets angry, and he gives her one solid punch, and that one solid punch knocks her out. And then Cheeria and the guys are like, oh, let's like, we need to stop now. Calrose is so angry that there's like 7 adventurers having to hold him back and they're struggling. And like Ryoka's like, no, I'm going to finish fighting him. I'm going to beat him up. I know I can win. I'm the best. All of you are cowards for using levels. And like all of this stuff, it just doesn't, the whole chapter does not make sense. I did think the fighting was very interesting to read either, because you're so emotionally against Ryoka this whole chapter. You don't want her to win. You don't want, you kind of want Calrose to slap the crap out of her, and like maybe we don't see her again in this story. And that's like the worst outcome. If you can take a character that was my favourite character in the series and make me go, I don't want to read chapters about this character anymore, like that's not good. That is not good. I'm sure there will be a lot of comments on this video trying to explain why I'm wrong, but it is just a personal opinion, guys. Like, I'm not saying it's objectively bad, but my personal opinion is this chapter actively dissuaded me from wanting to read more of this series, which should not be the case, especially with a serialized story. So yeah, basically Calrose beats the crap out of her, and she basically goes like, Calrose, like, you're an idiot, you're a coward, I can beat you any day, all this stuff. She's just taunting him, and Calrose obviously has his temper. She talks about how she can't stop herself, and how this has happened to her before, how she's lost friends, she's been kicked out of school. But like, talking about this now is not the time to talk about it. The time to talk about it is multiple chapters before. It needs to be weaved in. We've seen that she is, arrogant. We've seen that is she arrogant when she's the best runner and the best Muay Thai fighter I don't even know. We've seen that she's arrogant. We've seen that she's kind of up herself. We've seen that she's socially awkward. But, like, none of that leads to this. It's like, I don't know, like, it's like the domino picture where you've got, like, the tiny domino, and the tiny domino is, like, Ryoka's a bit arrogant, and the big domino is, like, Ryoka thinks she can beat up a Minotaur. Like, a lot of this just doesn't make sense. I really struggle to read this chapter from, like, multiple perspectives and angles. So she eventually, like, she's knocked out again, and she wakes up and she's alone with Chiria. Chiria casts a silence spell on her, and Chiria's like, "You fucked up. This is bad. You were rude. You impinged on everyone's honor, which is very important to them, especially Kalru's." She was like, I don't know what is going on with you, but sort it out, is basically what she says. And she's like, the way that you were today is not the way that, like, friends are. And, like, that makes, like, the Horns of Hammerhand are Ryoka's only friends in this entire world, and she's got nothing else to fall back on. She has no family, she has nothing, and she's just pushing them away. And it just, and then at the end of the chapter, Chiria's like, "Do anything like that again, and I will fight you, and I don't use my fists." And then she basically shows that she's incredibly powerful at ice magic, and walks away. And Ryoka then, after a while, like, sits up and then goes, "Right, well, that's it. Like, I'm out. I'm going." And she just runs off. Chiria does at one point say, like, "Oh, meet us in Lisgore to go in the ruins if you want. All of us are going to go try out these ruins now." And possibly because Ryoka's told them all that they're cowards, that they're going to do it. But I'm not excited about Ryoka and Eren meeting up anymore, because Eren, like, actually seems to be a really good, nice person, strong character, really interesting flaws, whereas, like, Ryoka just seems to be like, I can do anything, and then she can do anything, which is frustrating. Yeah, there's a lot of issues here. I mean, like, barefoot running as well. Barefoot running, you can't, people can't run hundreds of miles with no shoes on. That's just not realistic. And, like, especially, she's not taking levels, she's not doing X, Y, Z. Like, a lot of this doesn't make sense. And if it's going to be explained in future chapters, I don't need to know. You guys don't need to say that in the comments. For me, whether it is going to be explained in later chapters or not, we aren't given any clues or hints that it is going to be. Like, when you seed something, you need to not just, like, it's like pulling a gun in a play. So if you know Chekhov's gun, the famous story that there's a gun on a table in this play. I don't even know the play, but Chekhov, who wrote this play, there's a gun on the table, and that gun is there throughout the whole play to let you know that at some point a gun's going to get pulled. And we don't have the Chekhov's gun for this chapter. There isn't one. And there, we do have build-up that Ryoka's got a temper, that Ryoka's not nice to be around in many cases. But we're looking at something that's like, oh, I could be friends with this person, I just might not want to hang out with them all the time. To, like, if I knew this person, I would actively seek to remove them from my life. And that's not, that just rings so untrue for me. Yeah, difficult chapter to read, difficult video to record. I did think about halfway through, maybe I should scrap this and re-record it, but this is my honest, raw feeling after having read the chapter. Yeah. This would have been enough if I was on the fence. This would have been enough to have made me take a break or to stop reading this entirely. And I don't want that. I have loved this series so far. If we were talking about best reads of the year, I would have comfortably put The Wandering in my top 5. Once I mean, obviously I have to finish the first book first before I can make that comparison and discussion. But this whole chapter has massively soured me on this experience. Yeah, what a way to end a video. So I'm sure there will be a lot of people with a lot of thoughts on this chapter and who have a lot of thoughts on my thoughts on this chapter. Please do drop them down in the comments below. Obviously, anything that's kind of rude or whatever, I am not going to reply to, and I'll probably just delete out of hand. But if you'd like to have a discussion in the comments, please do. I'll comment. I'll reply to comments, and I'll have a chat with you guys. No future spoilers. I don't want to know whether any of this is ever explained in the future, or whether it's like, oh, she was cursed. Like, I don't want to know that stuff. So don't spoil me on it, because I am going to read on. Yeah, I mean, I can see why people say they don't like Ryoka in a lot of the comments on The Wandering Inn. But until today, she was my favourite character, which is why this stings a lot more, honestly. Yeah. Like this video if you liked it. And please do subscribe. Share the series with your friends, so that everyone who's reading The Wandering Inn can read along with me. Or if you want these as your refreshers for when you're rereading or you're catching up for later chapters, the more the merrier. The more people that watch these videos, the more likely I am to continue, to keep going, even in the face of chapters I don't particularly love, like this one. So, thanks so much for watching this one, and I will speak to you tomorrow.